Alright, this is part 2 of cinematic light shaping. In part 1 we covered direction of light and color of light, and in this video we're going to be covering light quality versus light quantity. Now the most obvious definition of light quantity is how much light there is, or the brightness of the light. Generally, the more light quantity you work with, the better. Shooting in low light situations usually isn't ideal as it forces you to boost your ISO, thus resulting in noisier, lower quality images. But when you do have to shoot in situations with low quantity of light, here are a few tips that I'd recommend. Number 1 is use prime lenses. Number 2 is to lower your shutter speed. Tip number 3 is to raise your ISO. And tip number 4 would be to use neat video. To see more of these low light tips and how to apply neat video, make sure to check out the virtual job shadow number 9, where I show how to apply these 4 tips in a lantern festival that I shot. But again, just because you have a lot of light quantity doesn't necessarily mean the light will look good. For example, the most light quantity is available at noonday when the sun is directly above you, but because the direction of light isn't flattering, it still isn't considered good light. The other reason noonday light doesn't look great is because the sun produces very hard light, which brings us to light quality. Light quality refers to how soft or hard the light is. Soft light refers to light that has shadows that transition gradually, which is much more forgiving on the face for wrinkles and blemishes. And hard light refers to light that has shadows that transition abruptly, so you can see a defined line between light and shadow. Hard light carves out the features of the face, so it's better for shaping light as you have more precise control over the light, but it doesn't usually look as flattering on skin unless your skin is pretty flawless. So, how do you make light soft or hard, you may ask? That is a great question, and this is important, so take note. The hardness or softness of the light is determined by the size of the light source in relation to the distance of your subject. In other words, if you have a small light source that is far away from your subject, you'll get a hard light. If you have a big light source that is close to your subject, you'll have a soft light. So then why does the sun produce hard light if it's such a huge light source, you may ask? Great question. It's because it's millions of miles away from the Earth. So even though it's a big light source, there's a lot of distance between the Earth and the sun. So it's actually a very small dot in the sky, so it produces hard light. Now on an overcast day, that light is diffused by the clouds, spreading out the light evenly across the whole sky, creating a much bigger light source, softening the light and making shadows much more gradual. So that's why you'll often see me putting a diffuser in front of my light when I'm shooting interviews, because I'm trying to make the light source bigger in relation to the subject to soften out the light. But just because I put a diffuser in front of the light doesn't mean it will automatically be soft. I also have to put the diffuser close to my subject. If I have a diffused light, but it's 20 feet away from the subject, it's still hard light. In relation to my subject, the light source is still small. But if I bring that diffuser just inches from my face, the light source is now huge in relationship to my subject and creates very soft light as it wraps around the face. This is why softboxes are so popular. It takes a small light source, like a light bulb, and spreads the light out over several feet to soften the light. So remember those 2 factors that make light soft: the size of the light source and the distance of the light from your subject. In this interview setup that you're seeing right now, I have an aperture 120D with a 40-inch soft dome to soften the light. I then place this soft dome as close to me as possible without being in the frame, so it's about 2 to 3 feet from my face. And to show you how this would look without the diffuser, here's me being lit by just the 120D without the diffuser. As you can see, these shadows become much more defined due to the small light source, so for lighting my subject, I usually try and always use soft light, as it's usually a more flattering look on the skin. However, for backlight, I actually prefer hard light, the reason being that hard light is better at carving out your subject and creating more defined lines. And the purpose of backlight is to separate your subject from the background to help them pop out. So by using harder light behind me with the Aperture LS Mini 20, placed about 8 feet behind me, it helps create an outline on my body. So softer light isn't necessarily always better. Soft and hard light each have their purposes in creating certain looks. So if you're shooting beauty shots of girls' faces, then you probably want to use softer light. But if you're shooting a workout video and want to show the definition of the athlete's muscles, then you'd probably want to use harder light. Now, if you don't have soft boxes and nice bright artificial lights to help you create certain looks, then you can usually use natural light for both hard and soft light. Again, using direct sunlight will give you hard light, so I like to use direct sunlight as a backlight to outline my subjects, this, and we talk more about this in the natural lighting video. But if you need soft light, then you may have to shoot during cloud coverage, or if you don't have time to wait for cloud coverage, you can find an open shaded area so there's no direct sunlight hitting your subject, and then use all the reflected sunlight from the sky, and everything else that is being lit by the sun will act as a big soft light source. You'll get a similar effect if you sit your subject near a big window, as long as you don't have direct sunlight coming through that window. And if you do have direct sunlight coming in through that window, then you can diffuse that light to make it softer with something like a curtain. Again, just because you have a lot of light quantity doesn't necessarily mean it's good light, and just because you have soft quality of light doesn't necessarily mean that it's the best light for every situation. But again, like I said, generally when working with people's faces, I try and use soft light for my key light. So those are the 4 main characteristics to be aware of: direction of light, color of light, quality of light, and quantity of light. So as you can see, there are so many different ways to light a scene, and this is why lighting can take up a big portion of your production schedule, because you can literally spend all day experimenting with different light setups trying to get the perfect lighting. My advice would be to get it to look 90% good and just start shooting, or else you're going to run out of time trying to achieve 100% perfect lighting for every shot. And understanding these 4 characteristics of light will help you know how to achieve certain looks and help you set them up much quicker once you're on set. So hopefully you learned some new insights about lighting. That's all I've got for now. If you have any further questions, please let me know.